The information contained in the SSI Spotlight series is designed for and intended for use by the NCAA membership. The webinar content represents the views and opinions of the participants and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of the NCAA. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The NCAA does not make any representations or warranties with respect to the accuracy of the content, nor is the content intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The webinar is intended for personal viewing only and may not be recorded.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Dina Casiro, NCAA Chief Medical Officer and Senior Vice President of the Sports Science Institute. Welcome to this SSI Spotlight on the NCAA Injury Surveillance Program. Today's session will focus on injury surveillance at the campus level. The NCAA Injury Surveillance Program is a voluntary data collection initiative designed to track and analyze medical illnesses and injuries that result from sport participation. Since 1982, athletic trainers have collaborated with the NCAA to create the largest collegiate sports injury database program in the world. And I cannot overstate the importance of athletic trainers in this process. Today's session will dive into the utility and value of the ISP, including the logistics of campus participation. I think this is an area worth spending some time on, and hopefully we can clear up some misconceptions. We are also excited to announce that our ISP data request process, formerly the Dataless Injury Statistics Clearinghouse, is now accepting applications. The data request process is a scientific program that provides de-identified injury surveillance data to researchers affiliated with academic institutions. So if you or anyone else on your campus is interested, please use the QR code on your screen to learn more. Today, we will also briefly highlight the NCAA Catastrophic Sport Injury Report legislation, which is an association-wide legislative mandate that went into effect August 1st, 2014. The legislation requires that all NCAA member schools report catastrophic events that are experienced by student athletes on their campus. To learn more about catastrophic injury reporting, including what constitutes a reportable event, use the QR code on your screen. And now I'd like to welcome our two guests for today's discussion. First, we have Avinash Chandran, Chief Science Officer and Injury Surveillance Program Director of the Dataless Center. We also have Nina Walker with us today. Nina is the Associate Head Athletic Trainer of Gymnastics at the University of North Carolina. Thank you both for being with us today. Let's start by asking each of you to tell us more about yourselves, including your role and relevant experience regarding today's topic. Avinash, let's start with you.
Thank you, Dr. Casero. It's wonderful to be here, and I appreciate the invitation. As noted, my name is Avinash Chandran, and I'm the Chief Science Officer and Managing Director of the NCAA Injury Surveillance Program at the Dataless Center. I'm a quantitative epidemiologist by training, and I've been involved in injury surveillance now for several years, dating back to my dissertation, my doctoral dissertation, and I've been in this capacity of leading the injury surveillance program at the Dataless Center now for approximately 5 years. So I appreciate the invitation, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Avinash. Nina?
Hi, thank you. My name is Nina Walker, as stated. I'm the Associate Head Athletic Trainer at UNC. I work with the women's gymnastics team. I have been chief in charge of our Dataless participation since its inception at UNC. We obviously value data tremendously and the scientific research that is done by the NCAA. I also serve as the president of the North Carolina Athletic Trainers Association, and I work with USA and World Lacrosse. And so in those capacities, I really have been able to benefit from the information that is acquired in this surveillance.
Well, thank you both so much. I am so excited to have you both here. I really think that today's session will help clear up for the membership a little bit more about what this program is all about and what kind of goes into it. So I really appreciate you both being here. So Avinash, let's start with the basics. Can you briefly discuss the history and purpose of the ISP program? Why does the Injury Surveillance Program exist?
So it's an important topic, and I'd like to start a little bit broadly. Injury surveillance is best defined as a tool in various aspects of public health practice. Surveillance is used as a method to get broad insights on various problems in populations or factions of the population. So injury surveillance, as a subset of public health surveillance, focuses on injury-related problems and topics across various athlete populations. As the audience might know, and as you referenced in the intro, the NCAA has maintained an injury surveillance program since 1982. And so for over 4 decades, data collected as part of the surveillance effort has been really the primary source of empirical information on injury patterns in sports sponsored across the membership. So as you know, when there is a health and safety related topic of interest in the Sports Science Institute or of interest to the membership, the ISP is looked upon as an important and robust source of information. So over the years, ISP data have informed various or guided various playing rules committees, advisory groups, and other initiatives led by the SSI. In addition to this, I'd also make this important remark. The ISP has been an invaluable resource, I'd say, to the academic audience, supporting numerous epidemiological reports on injury patterns in specific sports or specific injuries in athlete and collegiate athlete athletics. So I think across the board, the program is just a valuable source of information and with a rich and robust history.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I want to highlight when you mentioned when health and safety questions arise, we turn to ISP, right? And that I think is a really important message that I hope to get across today, that the data that is collected from the membership really does powerfully inform not only the work of SSI and CSMAS, but sort of rule changes in sports and other things that come about. So I really appreciate that comment. Can you talk to us a little bit, Avinash, about how injury rates and incidences are calculated?
Sure. It's always a great topic for an epidemiologist, as I'm sure you can imagine. So, I think it's important to again, zoom into injury rates from a higher level. So information collected within the surveillance program can be broadly, I believe, categorized into 2 families. There's injury data, and then there's exposure data. And so exposure data relate to any event in which, let's say, an athlete is participating, where there might be a risk of injury. So it might seem natural that injury-related information is captured as part of an injury surveillance program, but exposure information, I'd argue, is equivalently and equally important. This is how we get information, again, as I mentioned, on the various events. So that'd be practice sessions, competition events, where an athlete might be at risk of injury. And we use this information together to calculate injury rates, which, again, I suspect the audience might be familiar with. So you might have seen injury rates per 1,000 or 10,000 athlete exposures in different systems. There are different ways of characterizing those exposure events as well. And these type of epidemiological rates are really the most balanced way of describing and comparing how injuries happen between sports or across sports. It gives us a way of making apples to apples comparisons across practice or competition events, between sports, and so on. So I think it's the calculation of these rates come from this source premise that the injury surveillance information really can be split into 2 families, both of which are quite important because they come together in being able to produce this quantity that we can then use to make these important comparisons and understand injury patterns more robustly.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's an important nuance to point out that it isn't just about how many ankle sprains, right? Or how many hamstring strains, but how many practices did that athlete go through to have, X number of ankle sprains. So I appreciate that. Can you talk to us a little bit about what kinds of information do schools or the public have access to as it pertains to these injury rates and incidences?
Yeah, and I think this in response to that I'd say there's a plethora of publicly available resources, and I say publicly available include peer-reviewed resources as well. So as I'd mentioned, these data are routinely published as part of robust peer-reviewed articles, journal articles, and those tend to characterize injury patterns, say in particular sports, injury patterns related to specific injuries. So as we mentioned, ankle sprains or hamstring strains, as just referenced. And these are made available to public as much as possible, having been vetted through the peer review process, which, as you know, Dr. Casero, is sort of the gold standard for data and resources that we think of in the academic space, certainly. And these are made available to the public via open access sources. So in other words, these are routinely published in journals so that are readily accessible to athletic trainers in our sports medicine community. We strive to publish them in open access journals so that there are no barriers for athletic trainers to access them. Now, I can point the audience certainly to a recent special issue in the Journal of Athletic Training, which many of the audience might know is an entirely open access source that describes injury patterns across a variety of member-sponsored sports. All again, as I mentioned, open access. Now, anyone interested in specific topics can also reach out to the Datalist Center, and we work very closely, particularly for participating programs. We'll work very closely to create bespoke reports that sort of juxtapose their patterns to broader association-wide patterns. And we work very closely with the SSI on those efforts as well. So that's another way by which parts of the membership can access this information. Generally as well, they can reach out to the Datalist Center, because if we don't have access to certain data, and if you're not participating in the surveillance program, we try our best also to point you to other similar resources that might be of help as well. So altogether, there are different ways by which I would say the public can access this information.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think your comments about the bespoke reports are really interesting. I wonder how many member schools know that if they're participating in ISP, that they can reach out and say, hey, how do our rates in this particular area compare to those in the conference or those in the greater NCAA? So thank you for highlighting that. I think that's a really important, probably little known fact that I want to do my best to get that information out there. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about campus participation in the ISP. So Nina, in your view, why should a school consider participating in the program, and what value does this type of data on injury rates and incidences have for campuses?
Thanks for that question. I think for us personally, a lot of it has to do with our administration, our coaches, and the type of information that they like to receive. It's one thing for an athletic trainer to say, you know, we have X amount of injuries, or if we change this, then this will happen. But it's another thing when there's actual numbers involved. And with the explosion of data scientists and sports scientists and individuals that can really give us information about, you know, maybe the individual athlete, one thing that's always asked of us is like, how do we compare? What's the other school down the road looking like? Do we have the most amount of ACLs in the whole wide world? Because I think sometimes our coaches feel that way. And it's always nice to have the ability to just say, no, look, like nationally, this is what is happening. Teams are getting 1 or 2 per year, or whatever, that sport is. And being able to say it not as a global all sports, but to be able to say in gymnastics, this is what's going on, in lacrosse, this is what's happening. And I think that information is really powerful for coaches, because they get a little nervous when we start getting clusters of injuries and they think they're the only ones. But to hear, actual factual information. Our administrators are very data driven, and it is, I I almost wonder what they do behind the scenes if they compare like my school is better than your school because of this and this, because we're always asked, is there, something going on here that isn't going on somewhere else? And I think a lot of times we can put people's minds at ease when we can say, this is exactly what's going on. This is very on par with the national average. This, this amount of concussions isn't unusual for a contact sport, but to be really able to back it up and not just be what people think, but it is, full information. And then I think the other thing for us is that medical decision making. When we have data, we can make better decisions. And if I don't have data, then it's really challenging to know for sure if what I'm doing is, going well. Like sometimes we will put in initiatives, for example, like maybe we'll try an ACL prevention program one year. Well, what did our numbers look like last year? And what did our numbers look like for the 2 years after that? Were there any changes? And if you're not collecting data, then there's no way to like numerically really figure out if what you're doing is doing a good job. And so having the data list information, using our, platform the way that we use it, that helps us actually track all of the injuries that we have. It kind of keeps us a little bit more accountable because we know that, I'll get an email from Avinash about, teams that may or may not be participating. And then that makes sure that our data is clean. And I think that's one of the most important things for us is that all of our teams are doing the same thing. And so our coaches can get the same information, our administrators can get the same information.
Yeah, I love this. I think we're highlighting so many aspects of participation that I'm not sure that member schools are tracking on. And when I think about the ability to walk into an administrator's office or a coach's office with data in hand to say, hey, this is what's actually going on and this is how it compares to other schools, that is such a powerful way to communicate, I believe, with coaches and administrators. I know during my time on campus, I would always make sure before I was going into a meeting with an administrator or with a coach to talk about an issue that I knew right off the bat they might not fully understand the way I would as a medical professional. Having that data in hand, it just hammers that point home, and it gives you some ground to stand on when you're either asking for things or you're having these conversations. So I really, really do appreciate that. Avinash, how does the school go about opting in to participation if they wish to do so?
That's a great question. I'd certainly want to also sort of piggyback on one of Nina's remarks as well. The support from various parts of the membership, various stakeholders within the membership are really important to the success of the program, because as I see it, our AT colleagues on campus are really the lifeblood of the surveillance program and the lifeblood of the success of the surveillance program and any such surveillance efforts. Just from my conversations with colleagues that manage similar epidemiological colleagues who manage similar injury surveillance programs, both within the center, domestically and internationally, this is echoed. Sports medicine clinicians, and particularly ATs here, physiotherapists across, are really the lifeblood of the program. So ATs at participating institutions for the ISP are able to contribute data using their institutional sports medicine EMR systems, electronic medical record systems. The ISP's data architecture, without getting into too many technicalities, are compatible with various commercial EMR systems. And the list of these sort of integrated systems is ever growing, and we're always working with different partners to bring them into our network, so to speak. The information that an athletic trainer then enters at the institutional level, often for their own record keeping, can be pushed through to our systems should they choose to participate. And again, with a compatible system, these data are then de-identified and routinely audited by our staff. We re-engage, as Nina mentioned, with our AT colleagues in this process to ensure that the data are of highest fidelity and completeness, so that when we supply information back to the national office or to the SSI, we're able to do so with high confidence. So the only real sort of requirement for participation is a compatible EMR system. And once in the rhythm, participation as Nina can probably speak to better than me, takes only roughly 20 minutes per sport per week. So that's really the commitment that we speak of.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think the ability to have it be part of our EMR was a game changer, because before that, there was a lot of double entry. We had an EMR and then we'd have to go to another website, but now it's just part of it. So as we're closing out our injuries or as we're logging in an injury, we would just click make a couple extra clicks, and then that information is there. So it has been really helpful to have that integration with those EMRs.
I think that's so important to highlight, because I do think that that's where a lot of the misconception is around participating in the ISP, is that you're going to have to sit down and write all your notes and then kind of go back and re-enter all of that information again into the ISP. So Nina, what would you say the time commitment felt like for you in terms of the amount of extra time?
Yeah, it's hard to say, because once again, it's so fully integrated, but I would say it's less than a minute per injury, in terms of the life of the injury. So it's literally just a little bit of demographic information and then time loss, and then you're done with that. And the other thing is just, once again, for that exposure data, just to make sure that you're maintaining a calendar so that they know how many exposures, how many people participated in that sport that day. And so I think combined, it's probably like a minute to maybe add the calendar, a minute and a half per injury.
Great, that's helpful. Avinash, quick follow-up for you on that. If a school decides to participate, do they then have to enter data for all the sports that they support?
Great question, and one that's that we field very, very often. No, in terms of sports to enter, oftentimes, it is believed that you have to contribute for all sports. That's not the case, and we ask, that participants contribute at least one sport per season. Though, having said that, I'd say myself, my staff here are certainly very flexible, and we can work with we recognize the strain that recent years have placed on the sports medicine community across the membership. And so we understand the burden that certainly new participants might be under. So we work with different circumstances. Our priority really is to contribute, or we try to emphasize, contribute high fidelity and as much as possible for the sports that you decide upon contributing. We can work with different circumstances, and we can work with different combinations, and we can guide you as well, should you need that.
Yeah, and I think to that point, for us athletic trainers that work with sports that are not as well resourced as a football or basketball, when you look at lacrosses or gymnastics, there's usually a pretty low number of schools that participate in that, and then the data is not as powerful when you're bringing it up. And so it's always great, I love to fly the flag, is to make sure that as many schools that have your participating sport actually participate with that sport, because then that just makes your data and your information stronger, because you're up against multiple schools as opposed to like 2 schools that are doing it. If there's a lot of schools participating, then you're really getting great information. And so particularly with lacrosse, working with the international and national levels of it, we use that information a ton to make rules and regulations. But if there's a small N, if there's not a lot of schools that are participating, then maybe that's not the strongest data. And so when you want to, bring forth information, it's better to do it, en masse than to have one person say, hey, there's something wrong here. We need to change this rule. And the best way to do it is to have, an ISP like this, where you can have, hundreds of people participating in one, data set.
Yeah, another push for, the more programs that are participating in this, the stronger the data. The stronger the data, the more we all get out of this program and this process. So I appreciate that. Avinash, I did hear that there are some upcoming resources that are coming out to help schools sort of learn more about the process. Can you talk to us about some of those?
Yeah, there are existing resources and some upcoming resources as well. So, we at the Data Center remain ever available to athletic trainers. I think I can speak certainly confidently in terms of my staff as well to connect with the membership, with athletic trainers across the membership, troubleshoot any difficulties or discuss any problems that might be associated with reporting. For those who are considering participation and may need some resources, we're also, I think this is what you might be alluding to, we're also now releasing tutorial videos that offer really a step-by-step walkthrough of what participation entails. I recognize, I can relate to this myself oftentimes, and I don't know how my AT colleagues do this. I recognize that navigating sometimes, an EMR system and making sure that all the requisite information is inputted can be complex, can be challenging, and sometimes requires you to recall some details that you might have only seen in a brief orientation from our staff. So we're releasing this. We're making this available within our website. And we've made them customized for each of the various systems to several systems. So ATs can access these videos, see what participation might involve really for themselves. For even those who are participating, as I mentioned, they can serve as a valuable reminder, or refresher about reporting. So anyone interested in participation can certainly access these. And if there are any general questions about the surveillance program or participation, I generally would just encourage people to reach out to us at the Daedalus Center.
So Avinash, most of our audience today is athletic trainers, and we've already spoken about how overstretched the AT workforce is currently. Are there any ways for athletic trainers to earn continuing education units by participating in the ISP?
That's a great question, and I'd consider that to be one of the key benefits of participating in the program for our athletic trainer colleagues. Yes, they may reach out to us following participating for a given sport in a year. In the subsequent academic year, they're able to reach out to us in request of CEU credits for their participation. We are BOC authorized to provide 10 Category B CEUs to participating athletic trainers. And this is the time of year where we get those requests as well, and we're happy to fulfill them following participation. So yes, I encourage them to reach out following participation.
That's great, Avinash. Thank you so much. And any last comments about next steps if a school decides that they do want to start participating?
Really, the first starting point is just to reach out to and express interest in participation. The typical process involves a very brief orientation with one of our staff members, usually a research assistant or associate at the center, who's very well versed in various EMR systems, will be able to be on a call, walk through participation, and at that stage, if there's any testing required, we go through. Otherwise, we make the process available and open, and then we work fluidly and dynamically with the athletic trainers beyond that time. If there are initial sort of growing pains, so to speak, we work with our colleagues. We work with any staff that they might be working with within their institutions as well. So really, the initial inertia, so to speak, is just the email to us, and we're happy to engage beyond that.
Perfect, easy enough. So before we wrap up today's session, I want to quickly move on to the NCAA catastrophic injury reporting process. Nina, can you discuss broadly how your school complies with catastrophic injury reporting, and if you have any advice for other schools on what has worked well?
Yeah, this is also pretty near and dear to our heart since the center is located on our campus, and so I get to see the hard work that the individuals do there. But in essence, anytime there's a catastrophic injury, there's a reporting system that's really easy, and actually anyone can report it. It doesn't have to be the athletic trainer. I know confidentiality is always a challenge and something that people are concerned with when it comes to any type of injury, but even someone that witnesses the injury can report, the information so that it starts to trigger an investigation about what happened, what was the outcome. They meet with the families and the individuals to really get all of the data about it, but they can't do it unless there is some sort of trigger, whether it's a news article or an actual submission. And so for us, it's just been really easy. And as president of our state, like I pretty much know what happens, all over the state. So I make sure that the director has that information, and we do report, and we have the athletic trainer or someone report that. But the reporting isn't hard because nothing's completely mandatory, like there's just a couple fields that are. So it's just as much information as you have. And so if, confidentiality is a concern, you can have someone else on staff report. But just getting that information, just getting something out there really helps the researchers look at why this happened. And I think there's nothing that's more important in our profession than trying to prevent those catastrophic injuries. And the data that comes out of it, which is not only like objective, data, but you get subjective data as well, where you can hear or read about the actual incident. And I think as an athletic trainer, that's more valuable to me, because I get to see, was there an athletic trainer there? What sport was it? What were the circumstances of it? And so that is really helpful for us. So when we report, we'll just report what we feel like we can, confidently. A lot of times it's in the press anyway. So that information that is in the press is not, protected. And so those are really simple ways to get the information to the people that need to have it.
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight that not all of the reporting fields are mandatory. And so you don't have to answer certain questions that you may not feel comfortable answering. I think that's an important thing to highlight. So where do schools actually go to report events?
Yeah, there's two actual websites, and I wrote them down so I wouldn't, forget them. But nccisr.unc.edu is the main page, where it'll give you a lot of information about what's reportable, how, where the information goes. That's where you would find the data from past years. And if you are doing some research on something or looking at past injuries, that's where you would get it. Or you could just go directly to sportsinjuryreport.org, and that is the actual reporting portal for the incidents. And like I said, anyone can report it. A family member can, someone who was at the competition can. And so it's really easy to use.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that recap. Really important stuff. And thank you both so much for participating today. We really do appreciate your insight and your expertise on this important topic. Do either of you have any last sort of closing remarks or anything that you want to touch on before we wrap up?
In terms of, for me, I just think there's no downside to doing this. It doesn't take a lot of time. If you have an EMR that is compatible, the information that is achieved is so valuable to so many different people, whether it's people that create rules, legislators, administrators, athletic trainers, physicians. All these people are benefiting from it. So I think it's just one of those things that we just do because we want to make sure that the best information is out there.
I'd echo the same. I think surveillance and insights obtained from injury surveillance efforts are really the first step in any injury prevention sequence, any injury prevention process. So this information really transcends time. This information really benefits the sports medicine and athletic communities at large. So, and we remain ever committed to help our AT colleagues and ensure that they're able to participate. So we're open and inviting any and all who'd like to collaborate with us on this effort. So thank you to the NCAA and SSI for having us.
Yeah,
yes, thank you.
I appreciate you both. And I'll just wrap by sort of echoing that participation in this program helps to inform the work of my department in a way that really is invaluable. And so you both taking time today to talk about this program and answer some of our membership questions is really, really valuable. So thank you. And I'd like to thank the audience for attending today's session. I hope you all learned about the value and importance of participating in the ISP, and that if you don't already participate, you may consider signing on. It truly does inform our work. A quick reminder that certificates of attendance are available. Instructions can be found in the chat and via your email within the next 24 hours. Don't forget to email any questions or suggestions to ssi@ncaa.org, and we look forward to seeing you at our next SSI Spotlight.